Hi, welcome to part 2 of Is Your Brooklyn Street Named After a Slave Owner? Macon Street, named after Nathaniel Macon. Nathaniel was born in North Carolina in 1758 and he died in 1837. He was a member of the House of Representatives from 1791 to 1815, and he was the Speaker of the House from 1801 to 1807. He was known in Congress for the amount of negative votes he casted, opposing most actions of the government, and he was known for being an intense defender of slavery. While doing research, I also found this list right here, and you see it says slaves of Nathaniel Macon, and it has a list of 123 slaves. And these were found in his family Bibles. And then right here, it says that he is said to have owned 2,000 acres and 70 slaves, and to have divided his estate equally with his 2 daughters. Madison Street, named after James Madison. James Madison was born in Virginia in 1751 and died in 1836. He was the 4th president of the United States and is considered the father of the Constitution because he was the primary author. When Madison left office in 1817, he retired to his tobacco plantation, which held over 100 slaves. Again, while doing research, I got some crazy information. President Madison did not have kids with his wife Dolly, and many thought that he was infertile. But it has been rumored that he had a kid with one of his slaves named Corrine, and they had a kid named Jim, and then he sold Jim when he was a teenager. So the rumor is basically that he sold his half-black son when he was 15. Marcy Avenue, named after William Marcy. William Marcy was born in Massachusetts in 1786 and he died in 1857. He served as the U.S. Senator and the Governor of New York, as well as the United States Secretary of State. Marcy was considered one of the leaders of the Hunkers, which was a conservative, office-seeking, and pro-slavery faction of the Democratic Party in New York. Remember that the Democratic and the Republican used to kind of be opposite. And then they have this little speech over here where they say he denounced abolitionism when he was the governor of New York. So he did a speech basically saying that he was against freeing the slaves. Monroe Street, named after James Monroe. He was born in Virginia in 1758 and he died July 4th, 1831. He was the 5th president of the United States, and although he saw a gradual end to slavery and advocated for resettling freed slaves in Africa and the Caribbean, he operated his thriving highland plantation at his 35-acre estate in Virginia, which was ran by slave labor. Now, while doing research on him, I found this, and it says James Monroe enslaved hundreds. Their descendants still live next door. A small African-American community has existed less than 10 miles from the president's former plantation for generations. Only recently has the full extent of the relationship been revealed. So then you see below me, it shows his census records that shows 49 enslaved individuals at the Highland Plantation. And then over here, they interviewed those descendants, and it says, it was just understood that we were connected to the president, not by blood, but by slavery. For 7 generations, members of the Monroe town descendant community have lived less than 10 miles from Highland. Yet until 3 years ago, there had never been a conversation between them and the museum. And these are 2 of the Monroe descendants, Ada Monroe Saylor and George Monroe Jr. And you see it says George Monroe Jr. grew up in a homestead built by his great-great-grandfather, Ned Monroe. So they all got the last name, not by blood, but by slavery, which is honestly how a lot of our people got our last names. Our ancestors got their last name from whatever plantation they were on and whoever their slave master was. And unless that name was changed at some point, we all get those names carried down as well. Putnam Avenue, named after Israel Putnam. Putnam was born in Salem Village, Massachusetts, now known as Danvers, in 1718, and he died in 1790. He was an American Army general who fought at the Battle of Bunker Hill, which took place in 1775 during the American Revolutionary War. During his early 20s, he settled on a farm in Connecticut with his family and a number of slaves. Quincy Street, named after Josiah Quincy III. So there's mixed research on Quincy, which is similar to some of the other people. So you see below it says that in his political stance, he continued his opposition to the War of 1812, opposed slavery, and spoke out against the domination of the government by the slave power. Then on this side of me, it says the institution of slavery was not unfamiliar to Quincy. During his lifetime, slaves were held and sold as property in Massachusetts. And it also says Quincy's family may have even owned slaves. And from the other research I did on the other side, it said that his family was a member of Boston's upper class and they owned slaves. So maybe he didn't directly, but his family definitely did. And for any of my people who go to Harvard, he was the Harvard president from 1829 to 1845. Sanford Street, named after Thomas Sanford. He was born in Virginia in 1762 and died in 1808. He was a U.S. Senator and a state representative for Kentucky. He and his family lived on their land in Kentucky, and they owned about 30 slaves. Stuyvesant Avenue, named after Peter Stuyvesant. And keep in mind that this is also the guy who is half of why Bed-Stuy is named Bed-Stuy. Bedford is somebody else, but he is the Stuyvesant part. He was born in Paperga, Netherlands, in 1612 and died in 1672. He served as the last Dutch director, also known as the General of the Colony of New Netherland, from 1647 to 1664. New Netherland became New York in 1664. Stuyvesant was also the director of the Dutch West India Company, which played a pivotal role in the Atlantic slave trade. And our last one for part two, Van Buren Street, named after Martin Van Buren. He was born in 1782 and died in 1862. He was the 8th president of the United States from 1837 to 1841. Although he opposed the admission of Missouri as a slave state, he was a slave owner. From the research I did, his family owned 6 slaves and he inherited one named Tom. Tom escaped in 1814 and Van Buren made no effort to find him. But in December 1824, a man named A.G. Hammond located Tom in Massachusetts. Van Buren agreed to sell him for $50 as long as he could be captured without violence. The man told Van Buren that he couldn't promise that, and it ended up being that Tom stayed free. And below it shows that he's quoted saying, morally and politically speaking, slavery is a moral evil. But he considered it evil and wicked, yet he benefited from it both professionally, financially, and personally. Make sure you like, comment, and follow for more New York history, more Black history, more TV reviews, and more pop culture celebrity tea. Part 3 is coming up for this series, and part 3 will include Nostrand, Bergen, Farragut, Lee, Columbia, Carroll, Park Place, and Remsen, as long as I can find information on all of those streets. Those are the next 8 on my list. If not, then I have more to go, but those are the plans. And just a quick fun fact that's not really related to the video, but they are both slave owners. The Bergens and the Van Brunts were family through marriage, and they both owned slaves. So Bergen Street and Van Brunt Street. I will see you guys for part 3.